We all talk about free speech, like it's this simple, universally understood thing.
Yeah, seems straightforward on the surface.
But when you actually scratch beneath that surface, it's pretty clear it's one of the most complex, contested concepts of our time. It's not just about old laws or ideals anymore. It feels like a living, breathing, and frankly, kind of a messy beast sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's constantly evolving.
So today we're going to try and untangle this. It feels like instead of being this absolute principle, free speech has become more of a battlefield where the rules are always shifting and maybe sometimes decided by whoever shouts the loudest.
That's a really interesting way to put it. And I think what's truly striking right now is that free speech feels less like some fixed universal right and much more about this dynamic interplay of power and influence.
Oh, influence. Yeah.
And you see it being, well, weaponized, really, by different political factions. It's become a tool in this increasingly polarized digital world we live in.
That's a powerful point, the weaponization angle. So given this shifting landscape, where do we even start to unpack all the complexities? In this deep dive, we're going on a bit of a journey. We'll look at its historical roots, its legal boundaries, then dive into those stark political divides you mentioned. We'll also touch on the challenges from the digital age, which are huge.
Massive, yeah.
And finally, maybe look at some recent high-profile events that really put these tensions right out there on display. It feels like a crucial conversation to have. So welcome to the Deep Dive. This is episode 254 of the Swetlana AI podcast. We're really glad you're tuning in. And hey, if you find this stuff interesting, remember to like and subscribe to the podcast. It helps us keep bringing you these deep dives into complex topics. Ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
Okay, so most of us, if asked, could probably define free speech pretty quickly, right? That fundamental right to express thoughts, opinions, ideas without fearing censorship or retaliation.
Yeah, the basics. No government stopping you from speaking your mind, essentially.
Yeah. Right. And it's recognized globally as a human right. It's in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 19 specifically.
Yep.
And of course, enshrined in national constitutions, like the really famous one, the U.S. First Amendment.
And forget that one.
But here's where it starts getting tricky for me. Is that basic definition still enough? Especially when, as you said, the rules of engagement seem to be constantly shifting.
That's the core question, isn't it? And, you might think of it as a relatively modern idea, but the seeds were actually planted way, way back. Ancient Athens, for example.
Really? Ancient Athens?
Yeah. And then you had figures like John Milton, Erasmus, who were huge champions of the idea centuries ago. It started to get more formalized, to get real teeth, but things like England's Bill of Rights back in 1689.
Wow. Okay. So ancient wisdom, but with modern legal muscle behind it now.
Kind of, yeah. And crucially, it's not just about spoken words. That's important. Freedom of expression covers seeking, receiving, and imparting information and ideas.
Through any medium, right?
Exactly. Orally, writing, print, internet, art. You name it. It's about the content and the channel.
So the ideal sounds pretty straightforward, but even from the start, its application wasn't meant to be limitless, was it? Where do those crucial boundaries start to appear?
Right. This is where thinkers like John Stuart Mill come in. He gave us the harm principle, super influential idea.
The harm principle. Tell us more.
Basically, his argument was that your freedom, including speech, can only be restricted if it's necessary to prevent direct harm to other people.
Direct harm. Okay.
The classic example everyone uses is falsely shouting, "Fire!" in a crowded theater.
Right, causing a panic, a stampede.
Exactly. That's a clear, direct harm caused by the speech itself. The words create immediate physical danger.
That makes sense. It's a critical distinction. So even in its most idealized form, free speech was never intended to be an absolute free-for-all.
Precisely. And you see this idea echoed in international human rights law, too, like the ICCPR.
Oh, what's the ICCPR again?
Sorry, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. It's a major treaty. And it makes it really clear that free speech isn't absolute. Article 19 of the ICCPR explicitly says that exercising these rights carries, and I quote, special duties and responsibilities.
Okay, duties and responsibilities, like what?
Well, speech can be restricted for things like respecting the rights or reputations of others, or for protecting national security, public order, even public health or morals.
So even global frameworks have these built-in limits.
Absolutely. It acknowledges that rights exist within a society.
So we're not talking about anything goes. There are these common legal and ethical lines we generally accept, right? Things like libel, defamation.
Incitement to violence, obscenity, genuine threats to national security.
Yeah, those seem pretty widely understood as falling outside protected speech.
A vital point.
Yeah.
But then, what about speech that causes offense? Maybe deep offense, but not necessarily direct physical harm. This is where it gets muddier.
Ah, yes. The offense question.
Exactly. This brings in the Athens principle. It's another justification, some use for limits, trying to balance individual expression against, well, societal discomfort or outrage.
And that balance seems to be struck very differently in different places.
Hugely differently. It's fascinating. Take Holocaust denial, for instance. In many European countries, it's actually outlawed illegal speech.
Whereas in the U.S., under the First Amendment, it's generally protected, right? However abhorrent.
Generally, yes. And this isn't just some legal quirk. It shows really deep cultural differences in what's deemed acceptable, often tied to history, collective memory, and core societal values.
That distinction between direct harm and offense feels like a really powerful lens for looking at today's debates.
It really is.
And it leads us right into why free speech feels so contentious now, that deep political divide. It seems like the right and the left often come at this from fundamentally different places philosophically, like they have two different rule books.
That's a crucial observation. You see these perspectives clash constantly. On the political right, especially in the U.S. context, free speech is often framed as this almost unassailable individual right. The emphasis is on minimal government interference.
Laissez-faire speech, almost.
You could say that.
Yeah.
And they often view any limitation as a potential slippery slope towards, authoritarianism.
Right. I remember the backlash when Pam Bondi mentioned targeting hate speech.
Exactly. Figures like Eric Erickson immediately decried it as unconstitutional. That's a very common reaction on the right. This perspective also fuels a lot of the campus culture wars narrative. You hear constant accusations that universities are stifling conservative voices, that political correctness is used to shut down dissent.
We saw that flare up again around the reactions to the Charlie Kirk shooting incident, didn't we? The university firings.
Absolutely played into that narrative. And notice the distinction often made on the right when it comes to consequences for speech. Cancel culture is bad, seen as unfair, retrospective punishment. But immediate consequences, like someone losing their job for saying something the right disagrees with, that's often framed differently as, justified accountability.
Yeah.
Especially if it aligns with their political interests.
Like the reaction to the Kimmel suspension, some seem to celebrate it.
Precisely. Former President Trump's celebratory post is a key example. It really highlights what critics see as a selective application of the free speech principle.
Okay, so what about the left's perspective? How does it generally differ? From the left, you often hear that free speech is, yes, absolutely vital, but it's also a right that has to be balanced against other values.
Like social justice, equity.
Right. Protection against harm, especially for marginalized groups. The focus tends to be more on inclusivity, diversity, and the potential impact of speech.
So they're more likely to support restrictions on speech that incites violence or perpetuates hate or is seen as marginalizing vulnerable communities.
Although it's not monolithic, is it? I know some on the left are also wary of broad hate speech laws.
That's true. Legal experts like Heidi Kitttrosser, for example, have warned that vague definitions could actually lead to authoritarian overreach, which is something the left traditionally opposes. But generally, there's more openness to regulating speech seen as causing direct harm to minorities.
So in that view, something like Kimmel's suspension might be seen less as cancel culture and more as accountability.
Often, yes. Accountability for spreading misinformation, perhaps. You saw comments reflecting that view.
Though, again, not universal. Some critics warned about authoritarian parallels there, too.
Right, like the Miss Sassbox account you mentioned. And importantly, prominent figures on the left, like Governor Newsom or Chris Hayes, strongly condemned the Kimmel suspension as state-sponsored censorship. They saw it as part of a broader attack on free expression. So it's complex on both sides.
It really is.
But what's truly profound here, I think, is that it's not just a disagreement over specific policies. It feels like a fundamental fracture in how free speech itself is even defined.
Both sides think they're the true defenders.
Pretty much. But they're using totally different rule books for what counts as a foul or a fair play. It makes finding common ground incredibly difficult in today's polarized climate.
Okay, so if the political divisions weren't making things complicated enough, Let's add the internet.
Ah, the digital Wild West.
Exactly. It feels like it's transformed free speech into this sprawling, global, often chaotic landscape. It amplifies voices like never before, which can be great, but it also magnifies the challenges. Hate speech, misinformation, doxing.
Doxing revealing private info online, often to harass someone. Yeah.
And all of this leads to these intense debates and calls for content moderation by the platforms.
Which is a minefield in itself.
Yeah.
A huge issue is that there's just no universal definition of hate speech. What one person considers hateful, another sees as legitimate critique.
So when platforms take stuff down,
they're immediately slammed with accusations of censorship, often from whichever political side feels targeted.
and we have to remember, these huge platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Snapchat, X, they're private companies, right?
Crucially, yes. In the U.S. context, the First Amendment primarily restricts the government from censoring speech. It doesn't really apply in the same way to private companies setting their own rules.
Which leads to things like YouTube's demonetization policies or Snapchat's content rules.
Or those workplace firings we mentioned earlier after the Kirk incident. Private employers can, and often do, fire people for online comments that they feel damage the company's reputation, even if the speech itself might be legally protected from government action.
It's a whole different layer of control.
Absolutely. And it's not just about removing content. There are more subtle ways speech is controlled online.
Like what?
Well, the expert Tim Wu talks about disinformation tactics. Things like troll armies, deliberately spreading false narratives, or flooding platforms with noise to drown out specific voices or topics.
Fake news, propaganda bots.
All of it. Wu's point is fascinating. The scarcity has shifted. It used to be that getting information out was the hard part. Now information is everywhere. What's scarce is attention.
So these tactics work by overwhelming people's attention, drowning out disfavored speech.
Exactly. And this isn't just a Western issue. It's truly global. Look at the Great Firewall of China, systematically censoring the internet for its citizens.
Or the situation in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, cracking down hard on social media users. Like Awad al-Qarni, reportedly facing a death sentence just for tweets critical of the government. The digital age has added layers of complexity that, honestly, early free speech thinkers could never have dreamed of.
Okay, let's bring this down to some very recent flashpoints, specific events that really threw these tensions into sharp relief. The Jimmy Kimmel Live suspension seems like a key example.
Definitely a big one.
So Kimmel makes this inaccurate claim on his show, linking the person who attacked Charlie Kirk, Tyler Robinson, who evidence later showed leaned left and strongly opposed Kirk's views, linking him to MAGA supporters.
A significant factual error on a major platform.
And then, boom, the FCC gets involved. The chairman, Brendan Carr, who was appointed by Trump, makes this rare move, threatening ABC's broadcast license.
Which immediately turned it into a huge political firestorm.
Yeah.
It became this instant battleground, showcasing just how divided views are on media responsibility, misinformation, and censorship.
You had critics like Chris Hayes, Gavin Newsom, calling it a clear attack on free speech, a coordinated GOP censorship campaign.
Framing it as government overreach, political pressure.
But on the other side, supporters, including the official at White House account at the time and figures like Ted Cruz, they hailed it. They saw it as justified retribution for spreading misinformation. Necessary accountability.
It perfectly illustrated that chasm we talked about. Different interpretations of truth, responsibility, the role of media, the role of government, all colliding in one incident.
So the Kimmel thing was huge and very visible, but were there other related flashpoints around that time that also highlighted these tensions? Maybe less publicly?
Well, connected to the Charlie Kirk incident itself, we saw that wave of university firings and suspensions. People losing their jobs or being put on leave for comments they made about Kirk's death, comments deemed inappropriate.
Right, you mentioned Clemson, Florida Atlantic University, Professor Karen Leader.
Exactly. And these actions drew strong condemnation from free speech advocacy groups you'd normally expect to defend the institutions groups like the ACLU, PEN, America.
What did they say?
They called them intimidation tactics, knee-jerk dismissals. They worried these actions were creating a culture of fear on campuses, chilling legitimate if perhaps insensitive, expression.
And what makes those incidents particularly striking, I think, is the perceived hypocrisy.
How so?
Well, Charlie Kirk himself was obviously a very vocal champion of free speech, especially on campuses.
True.
So for actions to be taken against people commenting on his death, even if the comments were offensive or inappropriate, critics saw that as undermining the very principle Kirk supposedly stood for.
Yeah, it feeds into this narrative that both sides are guilty of, well, weaponizing free speech, using the concept for political advantage when it suits them, rather than consistently upholding it as a universal ideal.
It feels like the principle itself gets lost in the political crossfire.
Often, yeah. It becomes another tool in the culture war arsenal.
Okay, let's try and step back a bit from the specific incidents and look at the bigger picture. There's this term you hear sometimes, the free speech panic. What's that about?
Yeah, it's often used to describe a phenomenon seen particularly, though not exclusively, on the political right. It's this narrative that free speech is under unprecedented attack, often portraying conservatives or dissenting voices as victims of.
Snowflake students, political correctness run amok.
Those are the common tropes, yes.
Yeah.
And while there are genuine debates to be had about campus climates and online discourse, some analyses suggest that this panic narrative might be, well, a bit overblown.
How so?
Some reports, even parliamentary committees looking into this, have suggested that these exaggerated claims of censorship can sometimes mask deeper anxieties.
Anxieties about what?
Things like demographic shifts, younger generations leaning further left politically, or a perceived loss of traditional cultural authority. It might be less about a real surge in actual censorship and more about discomfort with who is now shaping the conversation, whose values are becoming dominant.
That's interesting. It's less about the rules changing and more about the players.
And that's one interpretation, yeah. A shift in cultural power dynamics manifesting as a free speech crisis narrative.
And this connects to another phenomenon, doesn't it? The rise of these free speech warriors, people often associated with the intellectual dark web.
Exactly. You have figures Steven Pinker, Douglas Murray, Jordan Peterson are often named in this context a loose network of public intellectuals who position themselves as challenging mainstream narratives and, crucially, fighting against perceived censorship or political correctness.
And the claim is they strategically use accusations of censorship.
That's the argument some critics make. That strategically leveraging claims of being censored or deplatformed or attacked for speaking uncomfortable truths becomes a powerful way to gain attention and build influence, especially online.
Being controversial gets clicks.
In this digital landscape, hostility and bravado can definitely become tactics for achieving virality. Think about Jordan Peterson's really combative interview with Kathy Newman. It went incredibly viral, partly because of the perceived clash over free speech and challenging norms.
So the very act of claiming your speech is being suppressed becomes a way to amplify it.
It can be, yeah. It creates an instant narrative of courageous truth teller versus oppressive forces, which is very compelling for a certain audience.
So looking at this whole landscape, what's the takeaway? If everyone can speak more easily than ever, what's the real fight about?
That's the paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
Communication technology has arguably made speech more anarchic, more widespread than ever before. Anyone with a phone can potentially broadcast their views globally.
Right.
So, the real battle, it seems, is no longer just about the quantity of speech, or even a legal right to speak. It's shifted. It's profoundly about whose speech gets heard, whose voices gain traction and influence.
And crucially,
who gets to define the boundaries of acceptable speech. Those boundaries are constantly being negotiated, redrawn, fought over. It's fundamentally a constant negotiation of power in the public square, both online and off.
wow. Okay, so as we wrap this up, maybe here's a thought to leave everyone with. The story of free speech. It isn't some static ideal perfectly preserved in an old legal text somewhere.
Definitely not.
It's this living, breathing, often really messy negotiation, a negotiation of power, of values, and increasingly of rapidly evolving technology.
Well said.
And maybe its future hinges less on clinging to abstract principles and more on our collective vigilance, our active engagement, and our commitment to actually navigate this really treacherous terrain together. It seems like it demands more from us than just sitting back and watching.
Active participation, critical thinking.
Yeah. Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of the complexities of free speech.
My pleasure. Always a fascinating topic.
And for everyone listening, don't forget to subscribe to the Swetlana AI podcast for more deep dives into these kinds of complex topics. And please leave a comment below. Share your own thoughts on the complexities of free speech. We'd genuinely love to hear from you.